You walk into an empty room and immediately reach for your phone. You don't even notice you're doing it. Your thumb just moves because silence, real silence, feels wrong. But here's the strange part. Your brain isn't afraid of quiet. It's afraid of something much older. Think about the last time you were truly alone with no sound at all. Maybe it was a waiting room. Maybe it was a long drive with no music. Within minutes, your mind started filling the gap, replaying an argument, rehearsing a conversation that hasn't happened yet, worrying about something you forgot to do. This isn't a personal flaw. It's a 2 million-year-old alarm system, and it's still running in your skull right now. In 2014, psychologist Timothy Wilson at the University of Virginia ran an experiment that sounds almost too strange to be real. He put people alone in a bare room for 15 minutes. No phone, no book, nothing to do but sit with their own thoughts. Before the experiment, he gave each participant the option to shock themselves with a mild electric current if they got bored. Most people said they'd never choose that. Then he left them alone. What happened? A quarter of the women and 2/3 of the men shocked themselves. Voluntarily, just to have something happen. Anything other than silence. Why would a human being choose pain over quiet? To understand that, you have to go back. Not centuries. Hundreds of thousands of years. For most of human history, silence didn't mean peace. Silence meant something had stopped. And when something stops in the wild, it usually means danger. Birds stop singing because a predator is near. Insects go quiet because something large is moving through the grass. Your ancestors who survived long enough to have children were the ones who noticed that silence, who felt uneasy in it, who scanned the tree line the second the noise dropped out. That unease didn't disappear when humans built cities and turned on light bulbs. It's still sitting in your nervous system today. Your brain doesn't know the difference between an empty apartment and an empty savanna. Quiet still reads as a warning. So it fills the gap the only way it knows how. With thought. With worry. With noise of its own making. Anthropologist Alyssa Crittenden, who has spent years living alongside the Hadza people of Tanzania, one of the last hunter-gatherer societies on Earth, has described something interesting about their environment. It's rarely silent. There's almost always sound. Insects. Wind through grass. Distant voices. Fire crackling. Actual dead silence. The kind you get in a modern soundproofed room was almost non-existent in the environment your body evolved for. In other words, you weren't built for silence. You were built for a constant, low hum of ambient life. Real quiet was rare, and rare things get flagged by the brain as significant. So when you sit in your quiet bedroom at 11 p.m. and suddenly feel restless, that isn't weakness. That's ancient wiring doing exactly what it was designed to do. It's asking a question your ancestors needed answered fast. What changed? And is it safe? But there's a twist, because silence isn't actually the enemy your brain thinks it is. In fact, the opposite might be true. In 2006, an Italian cardiologist named Luciano Bernardi ran a study on the physiological effects of music, and he found something researchers weren't expecting. It wasn't the music itself that had the strongest calming effect on the body. It was the pauses between musical phrases. The brief silences. Blood pressure and heart rate showed the biggest drops during those quiet gaps, not during the sound. Silence, when it isn't threatening, is one of the most physically restorative states a human body can enter. Your ancestors' alarm system was built for a world of sudden, unexplained silence. But brief, safe, expected quiet? That's when your nervous system actually exhales. So why does modern silence feel so uncomfortable if it's supposedly good for you? Because context is everything. Ancient silence was unpredictable. It arrived without warning and usually meant a threat had just entered the area. Modern silence is different. It's chosen. It's safe. But your threat detection system can't always tell the difference. It reacts to the absence of sound the same way it always has, by asking your brain to fill the space with vigilance. And in a world without predators, that vigilance has nowhere useful to go. So it turns inward. It becomes anxious thought, looping worry, the itch to check your phone. Here's where it gets even more interesting. Studies on sensory deprivation and stillness have found that the discomfort of silence usually peaks early, often within the first few minutes, and then fades if you stay with it. The brain runs through its threat checklist. Nothing happens. No predator. No danger. Eventually, it recalibrates. This is why people who meditate regularly often describe the first few minutes of a session as the hardest part. Your ancient alarm system is doing its scan. It just takes a while to accept that the scan came back clear. Think about how differently you'd treat silence if you understood what was actually happening in those first uncomfortable moments. Not a personal failure to sit still. Not a broken attention span. Just an old system checking the exits the way it's checked exits for every human who came before you. Your ancestors who ignored the uneasy quiet of the grasslands didn't get to pass on their genes. The ones who paid attention did. That hyper-alertness kept them alive. It also, thousands of generations later, is the exact same feeling that makes you reach for your phone the second a room goes quiet. But you're not on the savannah. You're in your kitchen, or your car, or your bed at midnight, and there is no predator in the tree. The silence you're running from isn't a threat. It's just unfamiliar. And your nervous system, doing its ancient job a little too well, mistakes unfamiliar for unsafe. So what do you do with that information? You don't need to fight the discomfort. You just need to outlast it. The next time silence feels unbearable, try staying in it for 2 more minutes than you want to. Not because silence is some enlightened state you're failing to reach, but because your body is running a very old, very reliable safety check, and it needs time to finish the scan. Somewhere in your nervous system is a version of a person standing in tall grass, listening for what stopped making noise. That person kept you alive long enough to exist. They're still in there, still listening, still a little on edge every time the world goes quiet. You walk into an empty room. Your thumb moves toward your phone. But maybe, just this once, you let the silence sit a little longer. Because it was never actually empty. It was just old.